The best revenge is massive success. What's a real-life example of this? Story 1. An Italian industrialist, builder of tractors, made a mint out of it and rewarded himself with a new Ferrari. Ferrari broke down, needed a new clutch. Wealthy industrialist waited patiently for his new clutch to arrive, and after many weeks it finally showed up. The same clutch he was putting in his tractors, more than twice the price. A little bit annoyed at this, he rang Ferrari to complain. They told him go back to building tractors. Leave supercars to us. And Lamborghini was born. Story 2. When I was at university, I had a friend who had a spare car parking space under his apartments, and as parking was difficult to find in the area, I asked if I could park there, and he said yes, so I did, for about a month until he told me to move it on Tuesday, tomorrow, as he was going to rent it out to someone. I told him I wasn't around until Wednesday morning. We had some sort of text argument, but I literally said thank you. I'll be happy to pay how much you want for the day, but I'm not physically back within 24 hours. Anyway, I got back Wednesday morning, and I've got a flat tire. When I was young, I thought it was just an abnormal thing. So I pump it up and drive off. And while traveling at 60 miles per hour, lose the steering and nearly crash. Tire's flat again. It's got a puncture wound. He's clearly put a screwdriver through my tire. So an AA callout, and 150 pounds later the tire's changed, and I'm fuming. Cut to 6 months later. I didn't say anything to him. What's to say? And there's a party at his one-bedroom flat, and I've been invited. Weird, but okay. We turn up. I'm enthusiastic to see him. Neither of us bring up the car. I feel like he thinks he got away with it, that I don't know it was him. I was told by a friend after the incident that he did do it. As the party was in full swing, I stole his microwave glass tray, his oven metal grill from inside the oven. I stole at least 4 left shoes. I took the power cable to his Wi-Fi router, and I took the plastic stopcock from inside his toilet cistern just before we left. It was a massively successful revenge. Apparently he was complaining to mutual friends for months. I never told anyone about it. I just nodded my head and said, "Oh, that's a shame." Story 3. Sony and Nintendo were working on a console together before the N64 came out, intending to utilize Nintendo's gaming hardware combined with Sony's sound tech to create games with more immersive sound capabilities than have been seen before. Partway through development, and immediately following Sony's announcement of their partnership, Nintendo backed out of the deal, which, if you're not aware of Japanese business etiquette, is kind of a D-move. Nintendo backed out to work with Philips to put Nintendo games on the CDI, which resulted in the worst-received Nintendo games of all time. Sony, out of spite, went on to make the PlayStation, one of the best-selling consoles in gaming history, and cement themselves as a massive player in the console wars to this day. Story 4. My mom. She, like the rest of her family, were all dirt poor. For them, it was traditional that they wouldn't go to college and would instead focus on finding a decent at best job as quickly as possible while also getting married and starting families young. My mom was different. She decided instead to go to college, and while she did drink on occasion, she stayed clear of the drugs that had ruined so many of her cousins' lives. She told me that her entire family looked down on her and said that she was wasting her time. Well, now she is currently the only one who owns a house and has a stable, well-paying career. My generation of cousins saw her success and are now following in her footsteps. Story 5. Julie Andrews was very popular as Eliza Doolittle in the stage version of My Fair Lady. However, when the film version was being developed, the head of Warner Bros. Studios, Jack Warner, decided that she wasn't well known enough. They wanted a big-name star in the role, so Audrey Hepburn was cast instead, despite needing her singing to be dubbed over. With the role no longer available, Andrews instead took on the role of the titular character in Mary Poppins. The film was a huge critical and commercial success, and earned Andrews both a Golden Globe and an Academy Award for her performance as the magical nanny. In her Golden Globe acceptance speech, Andrews referenced her snub for My Fair Lady, saying, "My thanks to a man who made a wonderful movie and who made all this possible in the first place, Mr. Jack Warner." Story 6. I went to a Christian college, not necessarily by choice, but whatever. Sex is a big no-no. I got involved with a girl I shouldn't have gotten mixed up with, wanted to end it. She told me she was pregnant and forged enough evidence to truly convince me. Turns out she wasn't, but whatever. Out of stress and anxiety, I told my roommate about it. He blabbed about it to his girlfriend, who then reported me to some school council that ended up expelling me for sexual immorality. JFC. I thought my life was over. Far from it. I hustled my ass off, finished school online, eventually, got an awesome job, hit 6 figures pretty quickly, met my wife, had a kid, bought a home, and I'm doing better than ever. Last time I heard, he was a struggling shift manager at a Domino's store near the school we went to. Married that snitch of a wife too, but I guess that's punishment enough for the rest of his life. He reached out to me for some career advice a few years ago, and I just gave him some interview tips and wished him well. Good riddance. Story 7. John Gurdon was sent home from school with a report card, and on that report card was a note to his parents from the headmaster pleading with them to not let him go into the science field to waste anyone's time. Several times he has been in trouble because he will not listen, but will insist on doing his work in his own way. I believe he has ideas about becoming a scientist. On his present showing, this is quite ridiculous. It would be a sheer waste of time, both on his part and of those who have to teach him, is what the report card said. Today, that report card is the only thing he has framed in his office, which is in a building that has now been named after him, after the many contributions to nuclear transplantation and cloning. He also has a Nobel Prize. Also, he has been knighted. He has received many honors and awards in addition. And the only thing he has framed is that report card telling him not to waste anyone's time by trying science. Story 8. Using my throwaway for this. Been with my partner for 10 years. 10 years of gaslighting. Being told that I am forgetful, pathetic, and not going to ever be successful. My kids, not his, are now grown up, and at 50 I was diagnosed with ADHD, and now being assessed for autism. That same year I achieved my master's degree, and got myself medicated, and worked hard with my kids to help them onto their life paths as they became adults. This was over the last couple of years. Little does my partner know that I am about to kick his gaslighting, narcissistic self out, and while I am now verging on poverty, having been manipulated to give up my career to support him and my kids, as he, apparently, couldn't take on any of the emotional or practical roles to assist. I can assure you, dear strangers of Reddit, that in a year's time, I will be successful and happier than I've ever been. Story 9. So a while back I applied for a role, and I was qualified, but the feedback I was given from one particular person was almost personal. You're not ready. The knowledge isn't there. You're just not what we look for in a person for this role, among other things. I honestly didn't want this particular job, but I was gunning for something higher for VRs, and thought this would be one of the steps to get there. Fast forward a year, my absolute dream job opens up a role. I'm ready. It was a huge career jump, the kind of jump that doesn't typically happen. Think steps on a ladder. I went up a few steps, more than the 2. Well, come to find out the woman who interviewed me for the other role also applied for this job. I got the job, not her. I'm in a much higher position than her, etc., and we work together in some capacity, but it's still just chef's kiss lol. Story 10. Activision, believe it or not. In order to get the funds to fund the sale of the original Atari console, the founders of Atari sold shares of the company to Warner Communications, who treated their game programmers particularly badly. Treated as engineers instead of game designers, Warner refused to pay bonuses to those who made higher-paying games and refused to allow anyone to get credited for their work to avoid their competitors from making offers to poach them from Atari. It was also done to keep production costs to a minimum as per Warner's wishes. In 1979, Atari spread around a memo in their offices as a form of brainstorming tactic to see what kind of games their staff should work on next, and four developers, David Crane, Larry Kaplan, Alan Miller, and Bob Whitehead, were incredulous to see that they were treated as badly as everyone else in their 35-man team, despite solely being responsible for 60% of all profits for Atari for a number of years. They proceeded to leave the company and make themselves into some of the first third-party developers on the market, since all ports and releases for consoles were exclusively done internally beforehand, as well as the fact that none of the consoles had actual copy protection. Atari would take major financial losses due to mismanagement within the company, as well as other developers making cheaper games for the console without paying royalties to Atari, while Activision is now basically evil incarnate since Bobby Kotick bought it in 1991. Story 11. My story. I dated a girl in college who seemed perfect. Gorgeous, sweet, smart, really rich, and killer in bed. After 2 years together, and me basically becoming part of her family, she abruptly broke up with me and told me flat out that she couldn't see us together long term because she had a family and social network that would never accept her marrying someone outside of their social class, and I suspect, racial group. I'm Hispanic and she was white. I never got that impression from anyone in her family or our friends group, so it was a complete shock, which I did not take well at the time. But as I was firmly in the group, I kept in contact with most of her family and our by then joint social group. Very shortly after we broke up, she was dating a lacrosse player from our school who was the prototypical J. Crew model. Tall, blonde, handsome AF, and of course, very well off. Our friends knew it was a bad breakup on my end and would always tell me how big of an idiot she was, but whatever, it just sucked ass for a while. Long story short, I struggled, but eventually moved on, graduated, and began my career, which started slow but ramped up after 5 to 7 years to the point where I was rubbing elbows with her dad and his social buddies on a frequent basis, and they were always totally cool with me. By then, she wanted me back, but by that time, I was engaged to my now wife, and it was a complete non-starter. All in all, that was 18 years ago. I am now quite successful both in career and finances, married with 2 great kids, and she's a 2-time divorcee who desperately wants kids, but can't have them, abortion complications from said J. Crew relationship, and struggles financially while living at home. When she came crawling back, it certainly felt like revenge to turn her down, but at this point, it's more me feeling bad that she never found happiness, or at least not yet. We're in our early 40s now. Story 12. My ex was a narcissistic drug-abusing D who was physically abusive and threw me down a flight of stairs, all the while yelling that I was worthless and would never be anything without him. That was 1992 when I left that apartment with nothing but the clothes on my back. After divorce and suing for custody, getting remarried and having a great life, I now have a 6-figure income, and he's struggling to pay rent at an RV park in Southern Oregon. He's still addicted to something or another, has lost all his teeth and most of his hair. He's never met his grandkids, never will. I get loving hugs and play time with them every few days, and they are the coolest kids ever. None of them have any of his qualities either.